Everybody ready? Take out your pens, your pads, your computers, whatever it is you need to write on, because we have a gift for you. For those of you who don't know, my name is Stephen G. Fullwood. I am the exhibitions coordinator for Marking Time. I'm taking that hat off right now, and I'm putting on another hat. I'm the co-founder of the Nomadic Archivist Project, and Miranda will talk a little bit about that in a moment. And we're here to introduce this wonderful project, the gift that I spoke about just a minute ago, called Archiving Marking Time. And we'll be working with Marking Time artists, supporters of Marking Time, supporters of other kinds of artists, who are interested in doing something with their archives. What is an archive? What does that mean? We're going to tell you very briefly what it means, and then we're going to open it up for question and answering. And throughout this entire process, for the next couple of days, you can speak with me and Miranda about what you want to do with your archive. Now, we've heard a lot of beautiful stories here today. We just had a beautiful song. And one of the ways that we connect and understand ourselves is through what we produce. A lot of wonderful artists in this space, in addition to people who support the artists. But what happens to those stories when you pass? What happens to those stories when you want to find what you've done? Is it in the garage, in the basement? You don't know where it is. Well, we're here to inspire you to think about that. I'm going to turn it over to Miranda. But before I do that, Miranda's reminded me of a few things. We really want to thank Nicole Fleetwood for giving us this opportunity to work with Marking Time. Please give it up for Nicole Fleetwood. She is a visionary. She knows exactly how I feel about her and her work. And to the Mellon Foundation for sponsoring Archiving Marking Time. And again, we're going to go more into what Archiving Marking Time means for each of you, and to really kind of think about what your archive looks like, where it is, and the kind of work that we are going to do to help you bring your dream of the archive together. Now I'm going to turn it over to Miranda.
Thanks. And just in the interest of time, I don't think we're going to have a chance to open up for questions and answers, but we'll be around all day today and the weekend to connect with you or answer any questions. And then we have, a space where you can connect with us as well. Thank you, Henry, again for opening up. There was actually a lot of symmetry between that and what we are going to talk about. Just to let you know who I am, my name is Miranda Mims, and I've been an archivist for about 15 years, but I always say that my journey started pretty much at birth. My mother is a genealogist. I come from a generation of genealogists. And 3 weeks after I was born, she had to do a training on census taking, and so of course I was right there with her. And since then I have been at countless cemeteries across this country and archives across this country, doing research and looking for the names of the people in my family. There's a lot of things that have sort of driven me to the archives, but one of the things that I think always centers me in sort of like this journey and thinking about like our legacy, thinking about the material culture that we leave behind. Mary, I loved what you said about time travel. I feel the same way. Thinking about not just talking with or having dialogue with people in the past, but also how are we portaling to the future? How are we communicating with people who come behind us through the material culture that we leave behind? And one of the biggest things that I always center on or think about are the names, the naming of people, finding out, especially is thinking about coming from a family of genealogists, thinking about the names of people who I've never met or will never meet. And
Maybe you will be.
Yes, they're speaking to us now. And so I had been trying to, and this sort of came about because I had been trying to find an ancestor of mine, my great-grandfather, John Mims, who I do know who his name is, but I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared when my grandfather was just a young boy, and then because of that disappearance, they were forced to leave their home. And so I've been trying to find him for a very long time. My family's been trying to find him for over 30 years, and with no luck. And so I always think about that, like, why doesn't he show up in the archives? Why are some voices and some stories present and some not? And what is my role in that work? What is my role not only searching for somebody in the archives, but what is my role as an archivist in ensuring that more voices show up in the archives, more of our stories show up and are present, and that we can be those connections from the past and into the future. And so in doing this and thinking about this, Stephen and I met about 10 years ago when we were both working at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which is an amazing and phenomenal archive that documents the African diasporic experience. But still involved within a larger institution, within a bureaucratic institution, there were things that Stephen and I couldn't do when working with people and thinking and talking with them about their archives, what they were interested in doing with them, where they were interested in their archives ending up or not. And so through that knowledge that we were sort of limited within working for just one institution, we created the Nomadic Archivist Project, and so Nomad is sort of in that sense, which gives us sort of the flexibility and the space to go wherever the need is, to not be beholden by one mission or a certain stream of funding or anything. We can really just meet people where they're at and have really honest dialogues and talk with people and think about what it is that they desire for their legacy. Where do they want to show up? Do they want to think about adding their materials to an institution like a museum or an academic space or a public library or a community library or just a family home? And so from that, Stephen and I founded the Nomadic Archivist Project in 2017. We've been working with different groups in this country and abroad on archiving their legacies. We also we sponsored a scholarship that also works with independent archivists and new archivists of African descent who are entering into this field, because we have realized that the pathway forward is really to support other people who understand the needs and the challenges of really making an inclusive space within the archives. So with that, just a brief introduction, but we have more information on our website if you'd like to know more about the Nomadic Archivist Project. But I'll end there because I know we have a limited amount of time, and so I'll let Stephen discuss his journey into the archives.
So it'll be a quick journey because I spoke a little bit about who I am in the program that we put together for you guys today. But I will say this, I was born to do this work. I was born to speak with you guys about your archives. I was born to help you organize and think about your legacies in the way in which you want to do them. Not that the way an institution might. Who gets to tell your story? I'm going to say this a lot. Who gets to tell your story? Does anyone know? Of course, you. And a part of telling that story can be how you organize your archives. What kinds of trails will you leave for people to find you? I've been to the future, along with Mary. Hey, Mary. So I've been to the future, and I know people are looking for you. So what will you do to lead them back to you? And I love what Miranda does, and I love the whole archival sensibility, because you're in the moment, but you're always dealing with the past, but you're always anticipating the future. And so I was born to do this work. I grew up 3 hours away from here in Toledo, Ohio. I guess every time we say something like that happens. Anyhow, And I was allowed to think outside of the conditions under which I was born. I love genealogy. I love thinking about how we talk to each other, past time. I loved working at the Charlotte Center. 19 years, 3 months, 24 days. It was like being in college. You were constantly, I always tell people, black people did everything already, you're just catching up. Because there's the evidence. And what I'm trying to impart here is that as you build your story and think about the things that tell your story, whether they are documents, photographs, what have you, and Miranda's going to talk a little bit about some of the things that constitute an archive, but there might be unconventional things as well. And so what we've been able to do collectively and individually is to not only help people navigate the institutions that they might want to engage with to collect their archives or preserve their archives, but also start community archives, genealogy. If you want to just know how to preserve your grandmother's photograph, or hundreds of boxes of things that tell your story, we can help you. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to you, Miranda, is that no one's responsible for your story the way you can tell it. But it can be challenging because oftentimes we think history is for, it's for the people that we collect in the institutions. We go see their archives, we see their paintings and so forth. You're doing this really amazing, beautiful work, and it transcends time. And part of helping to tell that story is to have some agency in taking care of what it is you have used to create that material. And so Miranda's going to share some resources and some ideas about some of the things that constitutes an archive. And then I'll come back and I'll talk a little bit more about archiving marking time.
Okay, so, yeah, I definitely agree. Okay, it's not on. Definitely agree with Stephen that we're responsible for telling our stories, but that path and that journey is a little bit, we know that some stories are more at risk than others in getting into the archives, but as you're thinking about, if you're thinking about, and I hope that everybody here is, regardless of sort of what space you are at right now in the world, that you are thinking about your legacy and sort of thinking about what could constitute for something that goes into the archives. So I know with a lot of people, they think about their finished product as something that ends up in the archive, like that finished painting. But for us as archivists, we sort of think about the journey to that finished product. So all the things that inspired you to create something. So if it was, a conversation you had with your mother, or if it was, something that you saw and you sort of wrote it down or noted it on a piece of paper, all of those things are part of the archives. The receipts that you may hold are a part of the archive. But thinking about what is worth preserving and what is not. So I love this picture here, this New York Times picture. That's what should an artist say? Because there's a lot of stuff in that picture, right? And so a lot of people don't understand what has value and what doesn't. And so for us, working with people, we try to really underscore the things that will have sort of an impact in the future. Things that you should think about as worth saving. So all of the letters that you may have in your collection or in your archive, at your house, family photographs. Yeah. Anything, like the brochures that you create, the ephemeral objects that you may have, a conversation that you might have with somebody on a videotape, something that you created for an event, anything that you have used in your artistic practice, any tools that you may have used, all of those things represent sort of like the bigger picture of your your archive, your lived experience in creating pieces, in creating works. And so as you start to think about what an archive could be, what your archive could be, what your archive can say, really start to reflect on the sort of, think about the sort of presence that you want to put into the future. Think about the value that the things that you have beyond what you may think of as valuable, but think about what other people might also find as valuable. Think about where you might want to house your things in the future.
Who gets to tell your story? Come on. I'm going to need this a little bit louder before I continue. But this is why we're here. Yes. Who gets to tell your story? Me. I know 2 photographers right now in this room who are archiving their works. Chandra McCormick and Keith Calhoun. Raise your hands, please. They're doing this really important work. And so, to tell you a little bit more about Archiving Marking Time, it's a 3-year initiative sponsored by Mellon, the Mellon Foundation. And the aim here is to preserve the cultural artifacts of the most impacted by prisons and to promote legacy building shaped by the beliefs and values of the artists and the organizations that steward their work. The archivist will provide direct support through teaching archival literacy, conducting needs assessments, providing resources, and advocacy. So I'm going to take those 4 very quickly. In terms of teaching archival literacy, this is a little bit of what we're doing today, just to bring you into this particular idea. Most of you have a sense of it already. Some of you have been genealogists or record keepers for your family. Some of you are pretty meticulous artists, so you are keeping everything and keeping it organized. The majority of the people that we work with over the last 25 years, most people create, put it away, move on to something else, move away, or move on multiple projects. So sometimes when people call you to say, hey, we would like to do this or have you do a copy of this, it would be so much easier to be able to put your hands on that thing immediately to say, yes, here's a list of the works I did in the 20s or the 1930s. I don't know why I'm going 1920s, 30s. The late 20th century, early 21st century. And so what we have here as a part of storytelling, the pictures that you see here are about my brother Daryl Forward, who passed away in 2016. These are some of the images that he created in and outside of prison. And so a great deal of those works are in my hands right now, in the process of preserving them, creating a small book for his family where his daughters and his son can actually talk about their relationship to their father. I feel like it's my responsibility to take care of these things. I also want to mention conducting needs assessments. And so what that means is that we are going to be working with folks in person and virtually to talk with people one-to-one in workshops, with organizations, or just people directly. So you have an archive, you want us to come to your house, take a look at what you have, go through boxes with you. We're able to provide this service for free along with resources to help you organize these things. Folders, boxes, all sponsored by the Mellon Foundation. I also want to mention providing resources, which I did a moment ago, just sorry. And advocacy, I think, is really important for so many reasons because we often enter these institutions with kind of out, the institutions, and it's like we need to walk into these institutions, particularly if they're publicly funded. We have a part of that. We are paying for these things. We are looking for resources. We are looking to find ourselves in the work. If not ourselves, but evidence of our history. And so within that, Miranda and I have been working with institutions forever. We understand, as she mentioned earlier, that they're bureaucratic institutions that often do not meet the needs of the people where they are. And so this is what we're hoping to address with Archiving Marking Time in a number of ways. And we can also help you think about community archives. There may be the Prison Express, those 4,000 items that you were talking about earlier. That's a lot of stuff. But it's great that you have it and that you're an archive and you're thinking more proactively about these things. And we can help you think about how to preserve those things. But also you may not want them to go to an institution. You may want them to be in an archive that you maintain or that your institution maintains. This is important to think about. Think wildly and imaginatively about what your archive could look like. It's not simply, it may be in a box, but the idea doesn't have to be in the box. Do you know what I mean? It can be larger than that. And so, one more slide. So I'm just reiterate these very quickly. Again, building archival literacy, consultations, the resources that we have, thanks to Mellon. We're definitely working with and continue to work with people who are interested in working with public institutions or private institutions. And in this room, fortunately, I've been working with Marking Time for a while, so I know a number of the artists, if not directly, but through email. And I'm happy to say that I think there's so much that can happen with this particular project. And we're so excited about it and so open to where you are and what you can do with this. So this is a great time to think. And when I think for the artists in the room and the advocates, what archives do is extend what you are doing into the future in really marvelous ways. If you've ever been to an archive and you were looking for something and you go, oh my God, I never knew this existed, ... a light goes on, and then that light goes somewhere. And so this is your opportunity to develop, to archive your stuff, so that you folks know what you did. I'm gonna get a little serious right here briefly, and that is my father passed away in June 22nd of this year. And I wrote about him in an essay called Work and Travel. And in the essay, he tells me that he didn't have much going on for him. I mean, he was a man who worked all of his life. He was a chef. And when he retired, he said, I just want, when they come in and take me out of this house, I want someone to know what I did here. So go around the house and find pieces of me here. And I've been doing it before he passed away. But it was important to me to tell his story. So I'm constantly telling stories about my family, to my family, so that they know, and sharing resources. Because it helps me be responsible to those who came before me and responsible to those who are coming after me. And the sessions include basic preservation instruction for both analog and digital work. I'm very interested in evaluations of archival collections. So this isn't this is valuable, this is not valuable. It's an evaluative process that centers you in what you want to do in this project. Make sense? This is our last slide. Please contact us. You see this cute little box here? These are our cards. And so we have cards for everyone folks who are interested in working with us. We can set up time to talk after the symposium, but sometimes during the symposium if you can catch me, Miranda. But we want to know what you're doing. We want to know what your archival dreams are. And we want, again, to thank Nicole Fleetwood for this opportunity, as well as Mellon, because we know the value in the work that we do. But sometimes, as it was discussed in so many of the stories that were told yesterday and today, that sometimes others don't see that value. And we have to do that work ourselves. So thank you very much. Miranda, you got any words?
Yeah, that's great. I would just say, definitely get in contact with us with any questions that you have or any thoughts that you may have around this. And we're just interested in collaborating.
Thank you very much.